Hello and welcome into the Sorare Data Show. I am Andrew Laird. You can find me as Lairdinho on Sorare. Today, talking about decision making, how we make decisions, what decisions we have to make, and pretty much how Sorare Data will help you make those decisions easier. It's like that. For those of you who watch our streams all the time, you'll notice that that was the Friday music. And I usually try to keep the music by day. And today is Monday. And that was the Friday music, basically. But it felt weird using the Monday music when it was just me. I don't know. We'll see. Any feedback on that? Always appreciated. Thank you to everybody for coming in. Anyan, Jordan, and Ricardo on the podium. Congratulations, you three. Ricardo Pellegrino. That's a fun name to say. So, Juju, what's up? Ryan Walter. Philly Dilly said poorly. We make decisions poorly. No. We're going to make good decisions from now on. Anders said, I do believe I had a lecture once titled roughly the same, but I doubt you will get into the neuroscience of decision making. I don't plan on getting into the neuroscience of decision making because I was going to say like I'm not an expert, but I'm not even sure there's a scale that I could even be on about how much I know about neuroscience because I know nothing. Yeah. Stefan, what's up? Arthur Nice, Nils, Mikey Bastin, Just Mike. It's still looking for anyone at Opta to use their brain about yesterday's Chelsea game. Excuse me. Casper, what's up? Ahmed, Sora Malta, Sora Burrow, Johnny Shaforko, Richard Krychek. Thanks everyone for coming in. Anion said we make good decisions for Sora to change everything and regret them afterwards. I'm not here to have that conversation. We might get into it. I doubt it, but that's not the conversation I'm having today. Yatsa, I don't know. I'm going to say Yatsa. Mike Basson said, can you explain how Man United thought things would improve this season just because they won the FA Cup? I can't. ETH is out. Who knows? I don't really care enough. Anyway. Matthew said, what would you do if you were fired and given 13.5 million pounds? That's a great question. That is a great question. You know, what's funny is that I do think that ETH is obviously at a point in his career where he's not just going to take that 13.5 million pounds and just like never work again. But man, I don't think I'd work again. I'm just kidding. I mean, I'm not kidding. I probably wouldn't. Like if somebody gave me $13.5 million, or pounds even, I'll take the dollars to not work. That seems better than working for it, right? Anyway. ZM Star said, I would go on TV and talk about what I just got fired for, like most guys. Oh, that's a funny line. Yeah. Yeah. It's I mean, it is what it is. Who knows? Decisions were made. Who knows? Frankly, maybe the first decision was not the right decision. And then the second decision in response to the first decision may have been the right one, but it looks pretty bad now. Like you don't want to necessarily just double down on bad decisions just because you made the first one, if that makes sense. Anyway, the point of today came about, in all honesty, because of Sorare NBA starting up again. And don't worry, this is not going to be a Sorare NBA conversation. But there is something about Sorare NBA that we need to discuss in order to get into the football side. So as many of you know, that Sorare Data is not providing a lineup builder this year for Sorare NBA. And one of the big benefits of the lineup builder for me was that the projections that we got from RotoWire were built right into the product. And so when you play a sport like NBA, a fantasy sport like the NBA, you realize that basketball is a very projectable sport. And so there are people who will run these numbers based on a lot of historical data and come up with a number that they say is kind of the median projection usually of how a player will perform in the next game. And as somebody who used to work on football projections, it's much more difficult than NBA because a lot of the actions that happen are just not nearly as prolific as in the NBA. When you have a sport where the total scoring is usually over 200 points, it's very different than a game that is high scoring if it gets to 4 total. And so I will say that projecting underlying stats, AA stats, all around stats for everyone who plays Sorare, projecting those is a little easier because the more often they happen, the more often you can see trends, and you can kind of, again, work on some sort of mathematical algorithm that can try to be predictive. And part of the thing I wanted to talk about today was what we use currently, not we as in Sorare data, but we as Sorare managers playing the football game, what we look at when we try to decide if a player has a good matchup. And it's something that Harry and I have talked about before. And I was going to have this conversation with Harry because we had that conversation of lineup building and what we look at. But I kind of wanted to work through a few things first. And so maybe this is just kind of the first episode of kind of a conversation about trying to figure out what's going to happen next when we don't really know. And so part of what will go into this conversation is what goes into like Sorare data pick scores, because Sorare data pick scores are supposed to be helpful indicators for users to understand the positive or negative situation that a player is about to be in, meaning like their next game. How good is their next game compared to others? And how good is that player in these situations compared to another player in their situation? Mike said, is NBA easier because it's a daily sport? I don't think it's necessarily easier because it's daily, but it's easier because there's just so much more data that it's easier to look back at data and decide 82 regular season games is a sufficient what's the word I'm looking for? Sample size, sample, then 38 games or 50 games or whatever it is. So the more data you have, the more we feel comfortable with calculated algorithmic projections. And we'll get into that. So M. Penn said, speaking of decisions, Pickford or Ederson. And Mike's bringing this up because he asked two smart people and me who we would play this past weekend, Pickford or Ederson. And it was a pretty sizable consensus that it was Pickford was the right play. And I'm not here to go with the whole like process over results thing, but really what I was just looking at was Pickford at home against Fulham, Ederson at home against Southampton. Regardless of the odds, because I admit that I do use odds when I think about this stuff, but the considerations that went into it were basically who's going to make more saves and who has the higher chance of a clean sheet. Like for goalkeepers, that's basically what we're thinking about, right? We want clean sheets, and we kind of know that Ederson doesn't have like the best all-around scores. And when Man City are gigantic favorites, like they were this weekend against Southampton, and I'll get into the whole favorites thing too, but I think we could all kind of agree going into the week, if you didn't even see, the odds of the game, that Manchester City should have an easier time against Southampton than Everton would against Fulham. but we would still consider that a positive matchup for Everton at home against Fulham. And so, kind of the argument that we had for Pickford was that the way that Everton play, he's more likely to make saves or be more active, because looking at the historical data, and I'm not talking about years ago, but literally the last 15 games, last 40 games, whatever it is, whatever the number needs to be for you to feel comfortable, that generally Pickford makes more saves than Ederson, because when Manchester City have 80% possession, then there's just not a lot of opportunities for Ederson to score, excuse me, to make saves. And when he does concede, he's probably scoring in like the mid 30s. And when he does get a clean sheet, he's probably scoring in the 60s. Whereas if Pickford concedes, he could be in the 50s. And if he gets a clean sheet, he could be in the 80s. And so the whole argument was like, if you're really trying to win, you want the guy who has the clearer path to scoring 80. And that was the argument for Pickford this week. Now, Ederson finished with 69. He had 9 AA thanks to 2 saves from inside the box. That was 8 of his 9.3 AA. And then 1.3 possession stats from 18 accurate passes. Meanwhile, Pickford did not get a clean sheet. Fulham scored, and he scored 47 points with a 12.2 AA, having had to make 2 saves inside the box. So he ended up making the same number of saves as Ederson, which I don't think many people would have expected, but saves can also be kind of wonky. And then he also added a diving save and a keeper sweeper. And yeah, Mike Basson said Ederson away is a better choice than Ederson at home, as at least there's a ceiling score away, but at home usually just a floor score. So I don't disagree with you. I also don't know if those numbers actually are true. So we can look at that. And these are sort of the things that go into our decision-making process. So this is Ederson. Let's use the last year just for Man City, because like, why not? And so at home, actually, I'll just do starts too. I don't know if it changes all that much. So at home, he averages 49.9 with an 8.7 AA. So the expectation is that he has higher AA away and likely more. And away, he's at 48.8 thanks to an 11.2 AA. So yeah, it's higher away. Of course, this weekend was at home. Oh no, it was at home, and he scored 69 with 9 AA, which is kind of where he is. And so Ryan kind of brings this up. Actually, he was replying to somebody, so let me see if I can find that first one. I can't, but Ryan said City have also given up a goal in 8 of the last 9. And the exception, was Chelsea on August 8th, 18th, excuse me. So you look down and he had a clean sheet against Inter in the Champions League. He had an assist here against Brentford, which everybody will be like, well, Ederson has that in his bag. Like, Ederson can get assists. And we say this about Ederson because he has 3 in 192 games. So in 189 of 192 games, he did not have an assist. But because it's happened before, we're like, oh, wait, he can do that. And that's sort of one of the things that goes into projections that people don't necessarily appreciate. And so let me just even talk about when I did projections, and I did them back when I was at RotoWire. And I'm not here to say that they were like the best projections ever, because I have a statistics background, but I wouldn't say like I'm not a statistician. I'm not a sports scientist, or what the hell they call these people now. So, and Soramalto said Southampton don't score goals, so Ederson was the clear choice. So, but that was sort of the point, that if they both had a decent chance at a clean sheet, do you want the player playing the team that never scores, like Southampton? Or do you take the team that and you expect that if they never score, they at least we'll put up some, or we'll at least push some shots on goal. And this whole like Southampton don't score, if we look back, they scored twice against Leicester, once against Southampton, or excuse me, once against Arsenal, once against Bournemouth, once against Ipswich. Man United shut them out. They scored against Brentford. Nottingham Forest kept them out, and so did Newcastle. That's this season. So the problem is that we don't really care how many goals they score. If they score one, the clean sheet is dead. And so like expecting them to score against Man City was not crazy, because they showed they scored at Arsenal. They scored at Brentford. Trying to see where else. They were in form because they had scored twice against Leicester at home. And so it's not all that crazy. Sormoto said Pickford didn't have a chance of a clean sheet, though. Fulham are a good outfit with attackers. We weren't going to keep a clean sheet. They could have scored another one or two. So that's, I think you're not that you're missing the point, but like if you look back, sorry, let me take that off. Everton had given up one goal in the last 3 games. Like we can't say they don't have a chance at a clean sheet when they shut out Newcastle. 2-0 win at Ipswich. And now they're playing Fulham at home? Now again, the clean sheet odds, I don't know what the odds were. Let me see. Is the RotoWire cheat sheet up? Let's see. Soccer cheat sheets. I don't know if they have one for the full Premier League. Oh, they do. Here we go. As I realize I'm not pulling this up on my shared screen, but please give me a second here. So this is a RotoWire cheat sheet. This is just basically odds. So like, oh wait, this is next week. Sorry. Do they not have one for? Oh, it's already gone. Oh, well, sorry. I thought I could pull up the clean sheet odds, but they're not that bad. So anyway, I don't think that there was any clear choice, but the choice, basically the things that we were considering were what we just went through. How many goals have they conceded this season? How many goals have their opponents scored this season? Are they significantly better than their opponent? Now, I think we could all agree that the difference between Man City and Southampton is much greater than the difference between Everton and Fulham. Like, there's no question. So the question comes down to when you're thinking about goalkeepers, and I can't believe this whole example has gotten us from goalkeepers. But basically, you just compare the two. If they both get a clean sheet, who probably scores more points? And it's probably Pickford. If they both concede, who scores more points? Probably Pickford. If Everton have a clean sheet and Man City don't, who scores more points? Obviously Pickford. And then the opposite. Man City gets the clean sheet, Fulham don't. Everton don't. Who scores more points? And we'd probably say Ederson. And that's what happened. And not to say that like each of those 4 choices had the same chance of happening. But the idea is you just have to figure out which one you think is the more likely outcome. And I don't think anybody is like confidently going into any Man City game and being like, they're absolutely keeping a clean sheet. Because if you bet on that every single game, you'd lose more often than you win. Sir Malta said, I understand what you're saying, but as a fan, you know your team. And if you watch a good amount of football, it's more than just data that goes into choices. Instinct and gut feeling plays a part. So I would argue that instinct and gut feelings tend to be wrong. That you probably went into those last 2 Everton games and you were like, yeah, they'll probably concede because Pickford, because they're not playing well. And then they shut out Ipswich and they shut out Newcastle. Like it happens. Yatza said, Everton odds of a clean sheet were around 40%, according to ChatGPT. I don't know where they get their odds, but ZM Star said instinct and gut is what bookmakers thrive on. Right. So like, sorry, somebody said ZMStar said, now circle back everything what you're saying to what you were about to finish on NBA. So it was actually less finishing about NBA, but like NBA projections are very different than football projections. And what I want to do is kind of go through the things that you consider when you are doing projections, because they're probably things that you think about when you're not using a projection system and only saying, is this guy in a good matchup? And so I think we could all agree that like a player's point average is not really helpful for the next game in terms of like just that, like L15, deciding on two players and just being like, oh yeah, this guy is a higher L15, so he's the better play this week, or L5 if you're a form guy. And you're like, well, who are they playing? And I'm like, I don't know, but like he scores better. And I think there are a lot of people who make bad Sorare decisions because that's what they do. This player is better than this player, and so I'm going to play him. Well, who are they playing? I don't know, but this guy is better, so he goes in my lineup. And then we make it worse by like, I paid a lot more for this guy, so he goes into Division One. Although if you make those types of decisions, or if you end up there in those types of decisions, you're probably not in Division One anyway. But anyway, so what else do you add? And this is kind of like how projection systems are built. So you take the players' point averages, and then you're like, well, it's different home and away. You're like, okay, so if he's home this weekend, let's only look at the home games. What's his average at home? And then you're like, well, that's not really fair because if they played 2 of the last 3 away, 3 of the last 4, who knows? Like, should you just ignore those? And the answer is no. So then you're like, all right, well, we'll include them all, but let's just weight the home games more. And then, so yeah, you take maybe weighted 60-40, 70-30, whatever you want to do. And that gives you kind of this like weighted average of the last few games. And like, is that enough? Probably not. Because you're like, well, the team they're playing is pretty good coming up. And now we have to start looking at the other team. Are they good? How good are they? Are they better away than they are at home? How much of a sample do we use for this average? And then you're like, well, they are good, but they actually really struggle with strikers. And you're like, okay, is your player a striker? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, all right. So how are they, like, why do they struggle against strikers? And now you start getting into the whole like, well, their center backs are small. And so like big strikers can take advantage. And you're like, all right, is your guy big? You're like, I don't know. He's sure. Why not? And then like, how do you calculate that? Do you go back and say the last 5 games where this team that they're playing played against a striker that was at least 6'3", they scored? My guy is 6'3.5". So he's going to score. And those are the things that like we start to think of that really don't matter. Because like, what if you just went back and you're like, oh, you know, he played Erling Haaland in one of those games, and like my guy's probably not Haaland, right? So now it's like, okay, what's the average of this player's position scores usually? Is he better than that? And does the team he's playing, does the team he's going to play, excuse me, give up a lot of points, fantasy points to that position because they happen to play really good ones recently? And my guy's like not that good. In fact, he's worse than all the ones that they've been playing. And so like, should I expect him to have a similar outcome? And you just think of like how far it goes. And eventually you get to the point you're like, oh, and it's supposed to rain this weekend. So then you go back and you try to see how your team and your player performs every time it's rained. And then you do all that research and you find out it doesn't matter. He's the same. But at least you know. But your opponents hate the rain. Just something about it. The water gets in their eyes. They're just soaking wet. Their jerseys are actually very heavy when they get rain, but not sweat. And so actually, maybe they'll be a little slower. And what's the pitch like? Does it drain really well? Like, is it going to be really sloppy, or will the ball just be wet and it just kind of skids everywhere? And these are the things that like you start to think about that, like, do they matter? Maybe. Can you numerically figure out how much of an advantage or a disadvantage it is? Nah. Oh yeah, Ryan, early kickoffs and fog. Good point. Good point, Ryan. Graham says the plastic pitch differential. Rikamon said this is starting to sound like a high conversation. It might be. Might be. So it's all of these things that you could put into a projection system. And a projection system will eventually spit out a number that says, if you played this game 1,000 times, the point total, like their player point total that happens the most often is 52.83. And you look at that data and you think, okay, my player is going to score 52, 53 points this week. And then when they score 80 or 8, all you think about is that the projection was wrong. And I think one of the biggest problems that we have as fantasy players is we don't understand what projections really mean. And you could also do like ceiling projections or floor projections, but like ultimately the idea is you're taking all of this historical data, and what that data is completely up to you. You could make, like I said, you could only look at home games if the upcoming game is home, and all of this stuff. And it'll give you a number, and you have to decide whether the guy who has the median average or the ceiling average, or whatever you want to use, of 57 is better than the guy projected at 56. When you play the slate the weekend 1,000 times and one happens to outscore the other one 501 times and the other one's 499, and we just never know what, like, we try to blame the projection. Ryan said, Laird's process is to get high on Mondays. Only way to tolerate a show with PSU fans for 1+ hour. No Sean, but Laird kept the process. I'm not high. I'm just trying to explain to you guys like what goes into this, because these are things that people think matter. And Philly Dilly said, I do wish Sorare had better ceiling tools like searchable 80th percentile scores. So like, what do you do with that data? And I think that's ultimately what it comes down to for me in this whole, like, how we make decisions in that is that whether you use like a numbered projection system or some sort of grade like we do for pick scores, the information that we're using is helping us make these decisions. But are we kind of considering too much? Are we making the game harder than it needs to be? And so I was going to pull up, I'll just do our pick scores. And because I want to talk about pick scores in terms of how this works, because I've seen like a lot of, I would call it feedback, criticism maybe is the better word, of pick scores, like that sometimes they're wrong. And I brought this up like previously, but my response is, if you think a pick score is wrong, then you're kind of admitting you don't know how a pick score works. And Yatsa said, how much better is a AAA over a AA? I think you could even ask, how much better is a AAA versus a different AAA? Because they're not equal. Not every AAA pick score is equal. So unfortunately, we are in, let's see, like it's Monday, so we have a midweek coming up. And I absolutely hate midweeks for a whole lot of reasons, but we'll get into them. Let's see. Philly Dilly said specifically last 15 on the lineup builder page uses the top score in the last 15. I don't find this super useful. I'd rather have it display like the fourth highest score. I mean, you can find the fourth highest score. Like if you just use the form here, or you don't even need the form tab. Like just use the last 15. You can see what the highest four scores are. But like you're not getting any of the information like how good was the opponent? Were they starting in a different position? Like there's a lot of things that you need to go into. Brad said, sorry, but the pick scores will always be wrong as long as they keep factoring in the community projections, which seem to be getting worse by the week. So I'll get into that. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to take that off. I'll get into that later. FPL Evolution said models are great, but they're not necessarily great for individual matches. That's where a bit of gut feel and study of recent form comes in for me. I will agree with the first part that models are not great for individual matches. I don't think gut feel and recent form is what brings it over the top in terms of helpfulness. So everyone who uses pick scores is used to seeing the spider graph here. And actually this is for All-Star this midweek, which again, like I using All-Star is kind of not my favorite, but here we are. And one thing that I want to be very clear on is that pick scores are position and competition dependent. So a player who has a AAA pick score in Challenger may have a AA in U23, for example. And the reason that's the case is that when you're looking at a specific player in a specific position, the pick score is a comparative tool. So in this example right here for All-Star in this midweek, Ademola Lookman, who had an absolute banger weekend. Is that this weekend? Hold on. What am I doing here? 22, October 29. Yeah, this is midweek. Sorry. And is that Monza? Anyway, so according to pick scores, which are based off of these 5 things, the matchup, the odds, projected lineup, form, and scoring history. And I'll get into what those are in a second. There is no forward with a better matchup using those 5 criteria than Lookman this midweek. Cucho Hernandez is second. He's obviously a forward. We've got Alistair Johnston third, Jan Sommer fourth, and Liam Scales fifth. And that's Cucho against the Red Bulls, Johnson against Dundee, Sommer away to Empoli. And if you're Brahim Traore. I thought that was Benny. And if you're Gator guy, you see that Sommer is away and you just say no chance. But for the purposes, we'll do that. And one thing that nobody ever sees is this legend here that we have in the lineup builder, this view table legend. And if you go to the classic view, you can see exactly what goes into the pick score. And this is why I say, which is not totally true, unfortunately now, but why I say like pick scores can't be wrong, because who was it before? Brad was saying because the community projection, which is like the projected lineup by the community, is always wrong, which is not true, but it's wrong in some instances that everybody decides to focus on, mostly because it's been lately with good players, and so we're fixing that. But everything else that goes into it is data that we've pulled, or is data from what has happened previously. And really the only way that, like, you can't build a projection system without data that of something that previously happened. Like that's how we do it. I just walked through the whole thing. So to look into these, the matchup, which we say is the matchup against this team for this expected position, is basically the opponent score. And so if we look at Oh, wait, sorry. If we look at Lookman, Monza allow 51 fantasy points per game over the last 15 at home, excuse me, away, to left-sided attacking midfielders, which is where Lookman has been playing most often. Well, these strikers are probably, he's on the left. Is he on the left? Let's see. He was a cam here. That's fun. Oh, so he was on the left side here. So I'm assuming when he was a striker, he's on the left side. So yeah, there he is. Okay. So that's reasonable. So that's what the matchup is. So the higher the opponent score, and the opponent score is points allowed by the opposition to the specific player's position. The odds, which are adjusted to the expected position. So, for example, the odds are higher for goalkeepers if they're going to keep a clean sheet than like an attacker. Clean sheet odds don't matter for an attacker. We actually don't even do cost efficiency anymore, so we should update this. The projected lineup is if the player is going to start. And the reason we included this, because we used to not, but the reason we included this is because we were getting players who were not expected to start with really high pick scores because everything else was kind of working in their favor. But everyone was like, I know he's not going to start, so why is he a double A? So we put that in specifically for that reason. So FPL Evolution, the pick score does not account for expected minutes. And I would argue that they don't matter because the other data that is involved kind of covers that. And Arthur said pick score is not future score, right? The pick score is basically a matchup indicator. How good is the matchup for this player? Now, there is a number behind the letter. And like, I think it's the top, it's not the top 10% or AAA. Maybe it is 10. I'll look into it. So Philly Dilly said expected minutes would be incredibly difficult to project. As somebody who used to do that, I agree. But it's actually, it doesn't even, like the expected minutes don't matter. And I don't want to say they don't matter. But the reason why they don't matter is because if it's a player who usually subs out, all we care about is how many points they scored in the minutes they played. So if they usually get subbed at 60, the points that they've scored previously, like we know is 60. And the whole like, oh, just do it per 90. But like, if they never play 60, why would we do it per 90? Because they don't play 90. Anyway, form is the form in the last 5 games compared to the player's standards, which is just another longer time of. So one of the things that we saw was when Jude Bellingham came back from injury, and everybody was like, his form was down. And he had I think he had a really good game, like his first game that he came back. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, so 50, not bad. So his form was actually really low because he had scored a 50 and he had missed four games before that. I don't think even if he scored 100, he would have a low form grade because we look at L5 versus how he normally scores. And it's like looking at all of them. It's not like taking the one game average like Sorare do with their L15s. So he scored 105 games. That's not good form for Jude Bellingham. And then the last one is scoring history, which does look more at the longer tail of games, last 15 within the same makeup. Meaning like if they're at home, we'll weigh that more heavily. So these are all of these things except the projected lineup are weighted in data. And that's why I make this argument like they can't be wrong because it's all like what has previously happened. And then we basically turn that into a number. And then we list them. Top 10% get AAA. I don't remember what the next one is. Yatsa said, shouldn't DNPs be ignored for form? Why? If a player played 10 games in a row, scored 80 in all of them, and then took 2 months off and then comes back, is he in form? Like, why would you ignore that? Brad said, all I wish for is to toggle on off each factor. If I want to ignore projected lineup, toggle off. If I don't believe in form, toggle off, etc. So Brad said, I understand maybe a pain in the ass to implement, but that would be the ideal pick score tool. It's not even a pain in the ass. It's literally like, I think it's technical. I don't know if it's impossible. It's extremely difficult because every single time you toggle something, it has to recalculate every single player. Because remember, this is like pick scores are relative scores to other players. And so you have to recalculate every single player every single time you make an adjustment, and every time anyone else makes an adjustment. So it's just not feasible. But you could also just ignore pick scores, which lots of people say they do and they really don't. Or they say like, "Oh no, I have my methods. I like to like consider this stuff," and then they name like 5 things that are all on this page, 4 of which go into the pick score. Or they look at it and they're just like, "I know this pick score is wrong," whatever that means. It's like, "Okay. It's just supposed to help you." All it does is basically calculate the things that you were probably looking at anyway. Like, how has the player performed recently? How did they perform at home? How is the opponent? How is the opponent against their scores? And the other thing I'll add, and the reason why I talk about sportsbook odds so much is because that's the data that sportsbooks use to figure out the percentage, like the probabilities that a team is going to win, get a clean sheet, score 3 goals, or allow 3 goals. Like that's why we include it here. Because you can make all the projections that you want, they're going to be better at it than you. And if they're better at it than you, why not use their data? Ace Pair said, I find pick scores useful to help me decide where I have to make a choice between 2 players. I could just flip a coin, but I would rather have some data. So, like, that's sort of where I am with this Ace Pair. I think the problem is that sometimes the coin flip is just as good as the pick score because the pick score, like looking at Lookman and Cucho, they're both AAA. We list Lookman first. So the number that we have that goes behind the pick score rating, his is slightly higher or is higher than Cucho's. I don't know how much higher, but it could be the possibility that it's like 1/100th of a point higher. In which case the coin flip could be just as helpful. And I'm not saying to just coin flip all of them. Like there is a difference between Lookman and just trying to find another forward here. I don't know who any of these guys are. Daiju Sasaki for Vissel Kobe, who has an A rating because he's in poor form. Let's see why the form is bad. Yeah, that seems poor. Oh, he had a goal 3 games ago. Excuse me. Okay. Is that good form? When he plays, he scores well. FPL Evolution said, I'd love a pick score that predicts Pep's lineups. I mean, if we had that, we'd be really rich. Sora Malta said, I love pick scores, think they're awesome, but there are variables in football which can't be calculated by data. This is when I apply feeling and instinct. So I agree that there are variables in football that can't be calculated by data. I don't think feeling and instinct are the solutions to that lack of data. Graham says bookies are mainly calculated by betting trends in the UK anyway, so you can class them as community picks. So a lot of sports books don't do that. The whole like they want action on both sides. But like a lot of sports books know who their like best bettors are, and they'll sway odds against those people. Like, sure, they would love to have money on both sides because then they just take the vig and they win. But there are instances where some books will take bigger positions because someone that they have who bets a lot of money and wins more often, they look and they were like, yeah, we either have to move the odds because we don't want so much exposure, or they say, yeah, no, I think they're right. And they go even higher. So, I mean, you can make the argument that some of them are community picks, but I don't think it's as simple as that. Valen said, just to confirm, the players listed higher on the list have more favorable data than the lower listed players with the same pick score. That is correct. Pick scores are always listed in order of strength, basically. So just because guys both have a AAA doesn't mean one is not better than the other. In this instance right here, Lookman is better than Cucho for this weekend, or midweek, excuse me. But again, it could be very minimal. And then when Cucho scores 100 and Lookman scores 99, and everyone's like, oh, you were wrong. It's like there was no wrong. The data we looked at, and we show you what the data is. Like, if there's more data that you guys think should be in there, like, I'm all ears. Yatsa said, player's form is unknown when he's missing games. If the games 2 months ago were from the same team and roster, I'd prefer to use them. You can. You for sure can. But we don't think so. Like, I would argue that if a player took 3 weeks off, 2 weeks off, and didn't play. Sora Malta said, I disagree. You can't only use data to set lineups. I'm sure I wouldn't have won as much on Sora without trusting myself and my instincts. So I'm not saying you can only use it. Like, I'm not saying that data is the only thing you need to use. I'm saying I think you're overrating your gut. That there probably was stuff in the data somewhere that or forget the data. But I don't think, like, I think there are instances where it's like a coin flip and it could just be anything. And because your gut happened to be the outcome, that's why you think you were right. But really, that's just what happens. That's literally, those are probabilities. ZM Star said, do you get to see the raw number at any point? No. And we talked about this actually. So the reason we don't do it is because it's not like a weighted 100-point scale. And it's not really a projected score. It's like a strength measure, a matchup strength measure. And we were fairly confident based off of conversations we had with users and who knew what we were doing and those who didn't, that giving a number would too often be viewed as a projection, like a projection number. And those are generally misunderstood by people or misused. Sorso said, any experts in cognitive bias here? I know the definition, but wish I could leverage/fight it more. I'm not one. Graham said, pick scores are a tool to help you make decisions. They shouldn't define your selection. This is it. That's it. Like me specifically see the number? I don't see the numbers, no. Like I could look them up somehow. But I don't have them. Like I don't use them as any part of my process. Cuz there's nothing in a raw number, meaning like a raw projected number, that helps me make the decision more than just looking at this pick score. Philly Dilly said, cognitive bias is knowing Pickford is the GOAT, so assuming he's clean sheeting every week. I mean, yeah, I think there's plenty of bias that went into that. Where somebody's like, no, some like dinosaurs had really long arms. Alligators, dinosaurs. Like, I was thinking of a T-Rex, but anyway. FPL Evolution says, for scouting, I'd love to see a metric that shows where the current floor price is compared to the last X months. I mean, that's on every, we have that. I mean, that's literally what our price graphs show. So this red filling is the average at that time. And then this red line is the floor. That was one of these. Maybe we just default to it now. And you can see the difference between classic and in season too. Philly said, I can't believe you just hit my man Pickford on the arms. I mean, guy's got tiny arms. What are you going to do? Is Pickford becoming the new Guzan? Guzan sound, the fountain of youth. ZM Star said, I'm more speaking from the point of view explaining this concept, how it works to the audience. In terms of showing the numbers, I can't just pull the numbers up. Suraso said, this is the point. Your bias is defined by previously learned experiences, which then makes your brain believe it is potentially more likely to happen. So exactly like that. So when I was doing projections at RotoWire, almost always a goalkeeper's expected assists were 0. And that is the case because they never get assists, most of them. And then we would get that one time where Ederson gets an assist. And all of a sudden it's like, all right, now because it's happened, he now has a 0.13% chance of getting an assist every game from now on. Because when you look at all of his historical stats, you see number of games, minutes played, assists. And as soon as the assists go from 0 to 1, like he's shown he can do it. It's going to happen again. Like, didn't Leno get an assist this weekend? Was that 2 weekends ago? 2 weekends ago. So now when you are considering Burn Leno in your lineup, you have to think like, oh, he has assist upside because it just happened 2 weeks ago. And those are sort of the weird things that like go into our thinking. Should you ever think that? What's the assist upside? And we were talking about like Ederson. People are like, no, Ederson is really good. He has 3 assists. So like, you never know. He has 3 assists in 198 starts for Man City. And now we're like, no, assist upside. Graham said, are there any plans to add an export to CSV for your gallery page? This was on a list somewhere long ago. I assume it's still on the list, but I don't think it's anytime soon. We had a legend tier that we were going to introduce. And that was part of it. So I'm actually curious for anybody who's in the live chat here of what if there's anything else that they use in their process that actually can be quantified or can't. Like, I'm genuinely curious what they use. So anyway, talking about all the things that we talk about, that we look into in terms of like what we consider when we make lineups, are in the lineup builder. So this is like a lineup I built for the midweek, but like the pick score, we show the pick score, we show how it happens, and all of the data that goes into the pick score can be found in the lineup builder. So like Rasinger against Corinthians this midweek in Sudamericana. And Corinthians have allowed 60 fantasy points per game to cams, or just center mid, excuse me. So Augustin Almendra fits in that. And then if you look, you can check his form. We have, the odds. They're 44% to win, 18% for 3 goals scored. And we look at goals scored because he tends to be more, because for a center mid, we're more concerned about how many goals they're going to score instead of how many goals they'll concede. And form, you can see all the underlying stats since then. All around averages over his last 15. You can do his last 40 if you want, however much you want. Bob Flynn said, I asked PSU fan who he's using. Yeah. Sursol said, my irrational predictions as to which top team will bottle it to a lower team. Real Madrid losing to Mallorca. That's one of the things that isn't included. Major NFT said, I use X to look at training reports from journalists. To do what, though? I assume that's just to see if you think a guy who might not start will start, right? But you're not going to like read a training report and be like, oh, this player, like, there is nothing I like more than when every so often there's like an Arda Güler training video or training clip where he like nutmegs someone and that's it. And everyone's like, oh, here we go. And then he doesn't start again for another 3 months. ZM Star said, I don't think you spoke about how often the players take a step outside the house on the non-dominant foot. Philly Dilly said, I look at the SD player page and look at the percent of green or dark green scores. So I'm assuming you mean here, like this, or up here. You can see this is still Leno's page. Probably should have pulled up somebody a little more exciting. How about Ebreche Eze? What's he got in his last year? 2 90s to 100s and 2 80s to 90s. A lot of yellow. But like, this is all of these numbers. And I assume you're looking at these to be like, oh, can he spike? How high can he get? And if like that's a big consideration for you, and it is for a lot of people, you look at somebody like Ederson, who has one score over 80 in the last year. One. 80 and above, 2. And we go back to our boy Pickford. And he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over 80. But goalies are different. Sorry. Ryan Gauld, anyone? He's got a lot, I'm sure. Yeah. He's got more 90 to 100s than 80s to 90s. Not bad at home, not bad away. Just Mike it with an amazing comment here. Goalkeepers should be captained more. Kai said, Sorare score prediction from Liga Insider for the Bundesliga. Liga Insider does Sorare score predictions or just like projected lineup predictions. Sorare said, I have a theory about strikers in form who aren't world class. If they score in a run of games, they become a marked man by the opposition. This focus could allow someone else more opportunities. Okay, how many is a run of games? What's funny about this is the number of people who would see that run of games and be like, he's in form, I gotta play him. Who was the guy from Scotland a few years? Kevin Van Veen. Does he still exist? Van Veen, excuse me. That's St. Mirren now. Had like, wasn't it him? Yeah, there he is. Like, so he had, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 games in a row with a goal. And he has scored zero. My God, zero since. Now, granted, was that a change? When did the team change? He was at Motherwell, then Kilmarnock. Yeah, whatever. Ryan said, I think that's an example of a cognitive bias. Yeah, maybe. So if he went back to Motherwell, would he be in form? Because he scored every single time except his last one. I was not expecting to talk about Kevin Van Veen today. I find that hard to say, Van Veen instead of Van Vleen. ZM Star said, let's keep putting our gut feelings in the chat. Laird is getting frustrated now. I love them. Like, I want to hear more of them. Ace Pair said, trying to match lineups with my current overall strategy, full stack, no stack, attacking stats, etc. Why are those the options? Kai said, for paying members, this is Liga Insider, they have predictions for different fantasy football games. One is Sorare, but only for the Bundesliga. That's interesting. I wonder what they use. Good example, upside example is Bruno G versus Declan Rice. Let's see that. Now I'm only going to look at Newcastle. Newcastle, L40, 30 starts. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4. What happened here? We lost our. And let's pull up Declan Rice. What did I put for Bruno? L40, and we'll just do Arsenal for Declan Rice. So 57 average for Rice, 64 for Bruno. They're almost not even comparable. Score-wise, obviously, this is much better. I would also argue that Gomes plays a much more, if that's how you even say it, plays a much more attacking position than Rice. Obviously, they're both on set pieces, but like I'm not sure that's a. They're basically the same price. I don't know why. Soursoul said, I support a lot of crap teams and see this happen all the time, but you can only use gut feel to predict it, I think, which is how it makes it bad. I would probably say it doesn't happen as often as you think, but like when it happens, it's very visual to you. And so, yeah, and you'll probably be like, no, I can think of these like 3 times. And it's like, well, it's like 3 out of 100. Grem said, Yuri Alberto can be classed as a striker in form for me. I picked him up for 90p and he has a DA in his last 7 games. I've never heard of this fella. Corinthians. There he is. He hurt? Oh, U23. Oh, he's suspended now. That's pretty good. So he's going to miss this Cuiabá. I don't know. And then he's away to Racing. Do you think he scores against Racing? I mean, Gabriel Arias concedes all the time, so maybe he does. Home against Palmeiras, that's tough. And do you just keep playing him because, like, you just keep playing him? Actually, sorry, we should check that price graph. I don't see. Oh, wait, I'm not in pounds, am I? Where's this 90p? I don't see 90p anywhere. 3 months ago? Oh, there we go. Oh my God, 17. Oh, what are we doing, guys? I was told classic cards are dead, guys. Come on. Anyway. GG's, Graham. Love that. Just Mike, and I played Osasuna stack all game weeks before this one where I chose to put one super rare in it. It didn't pan out right. Why'd you change? Mike said he uses the magic 8-ball. ZMstar said, I live in an area with a lot of bald eagles, so if I see one in the morning, I know it's a good weekend to play my Americans abroad. Yeah. Sorare Bald Eagles. That's the next Twitter account we need. Major NFT said, I avoid playing players coming back from paternal leave for one game. Okay. Ace Pair said, I like using a D20. I don't know what that is. What's a D20? Oh. A 20-sided die. I didn't know this existed, but I love it. I don't know why I keep pushing the button to get different numbers for 16. Ooh, 16. Now are we in form? Ah, darn. I guess not. Sorry. Those L40s are way off. Must have been sorted differently. That was Bruno G. Let me check that. Where is he? Declan Rice, L40 Arsenal. Bruno. L40 Newcastle. They're all this. That's the same, right? L40 for Arsenal, L40 for Newcastle, 64.57. Arthur said, gut feeling in game week 15. I captained my goalie, Davy Rofe, in Challenger in-season Division 4. He didn't keep a clean sheet and still scored 79. I have one of those. What did he do? Home again? Oh, no. Away to St. Truiden. 11 saves, 4 from inside the box, 4 diving saves. You love to see it. Love to see that. Anyway. Sora Malta said, you're only allowed to play bald players, Captain Tuma, every week. I wanted to do that this weekend, but he's hurt, and I don't know if he's going to be back in time. Mostly because I bought a wrapped card on the secondary market of Teddy Tuma last week, and it turned into a special edition card. Lightning one, too. I love this card. I would like to use it one day. I wonder if we'll get a special weekly for bald players. Probably not, because all of those, they have to like manually check the winners, and I don't think Paul wants to do that. Bowen said, I have a hard time not giving preference to guys that play for the team I root for because I'm always overly optimistic about my team, and it makes watching the game more fun. So I don't think that's bad because you're having more fun. How about that? It's okay to be optimistic because you're recognizing it, that that might be a problem, or you're not maximizing your opportunities. But if you're having more fun, and if the stars align and it ends up smashing and you win huge with your team, there is no better fun than that. None on Sorare. Bent Peterson, I don't know that name, but welcome. Does the lineup builder take into account card experience for the specific card? You mean like XP totals? It should. But again, so like the pick score doesn't, no. But if in like the suggestions, if you have like 2 cards, it should pick the one that's higher. Dan said, I've stopped playing rivals for the team I support as I'm sat there wanting certain players not to score. That's healthy. Dan Baskyfield. That's a fun name to say. I think that's okay. Like ultimately, we're trying to do this for fun. And that's something that we've talked about a while, that people make suboptimal decisions on Sorare because the fun upside is immense. Like I put together that Ren collection or my Midtjylland collection, and I play those guys together sometimes because like in the instance where they do win and the right guys score and you have them in your lineup, you're like, these are my guys. Like that is the best feeling, and one that I just don't know because Midtjylland just ruined everything for me. Like this lineup here that I wanted to win so badly. I said to my son, I was like, I just need a clean sheet and this lineup could really do well. Midtjylland win 2-0. Joel Anderson doesn't start. I did a double defensive stack. Emmy struggled for the first time. He was in form. He was in AA form, if we can say that, right? 28.9. That 6 isn't so good, but that was right after the international break. Only 45 minutes per 90. It's at 13.4 AA is not bad. But anyway. But I think it's okay to like make decisions because you're like, actually, I think I would have more fun if this lineup that I made hit big. No, not even big, just hit. Yeah, this lineup helped me win. Like that's okay. Don't don't make don't make yourself feel bad for prioritizing fun. Oh, I should have done this, but like I just wanted to play these guys together. It's okay. It's really okay. So I mentioned before that a lot of the stuff that I was talking about is data that can be calculated or used in part of an algorithm that we use in our lineup builder. And the lineup builder is like, I think without a doubt is the best tool available to any Sorare manager. And you can do so much with it. All of the pick scores are there as well. But if you are somebody who either uses it as a rookie and wants to try it more, or you're somebody who's never used it because you don't have a membership, if you want a 72-hour star membership, I'll give away a bunch. You just leave your Sorare name in the comments of this video, and I'll get you set up. Just make sure that you're like paying attention to the comments because I'll probably reply to the comment on the video with like the code that you need. But I think more people should try it out because I think once you try it out, and really my favorite thing about the lineup builder now is building ahead. Like today is Monday. I'm not only going to build my lineups for this midweek, but I'll build them for the weekend today and maybe the following weekend just to see what I have. Like I think that is invaluable. Now, granted, some of the data that I use to make lineups will change by then. Players will have played a couple games, odds will change, whatever it is. But it gives you like a phenomenal look at like what you have coming up. Oh, this player has a really good matchup in 2 weeks. Should I be able to, like, can I surround him with other players that also have really good matchups? So yeah, if you want a free 72 hours, just drop your name in the comment below and I'll be sure to get you set up. Mike said, doesn't the power adjusted filter include XP in the pick score assessment? It does for the suggested lineup, but not the specific pick score, excuse me, if that makes sense. So like if you have two players that have like very similar pick scores and one looks higher than the other, or it's listed higher, but it could be by this much, and this player behind has higher XP, it'll probably give you that second player, if that makes sense. Philly Dilly said, my favorite part of the lineup builder is when I'm using it, I'm not buying cards. Is when I'm using it, I'm not buying cards. I mean, buying cards to fit in the lineup builder is great. Doing that is really helpful to set training lineups to maximize XP. Yep. Palmwa said, oh my God, Malta, I didn't even think about training teams on the builder. So yeah, you can do training teams on the builder. The only thing that I will point out is like we have a bunch of requests and we know that we're going to but people are asking for a level filter, excuse me, so you don't train level 20 guys. And that's coming, but like it's not there yet. But we know. Major NFT said, you said you'd tell us how they're fixing the roster selection from the community. Can you talk about that? I got burnt again this game week. How did you get burnt this game week? Genuinely curious. Yeah. Yatsa, I love this. Wouldn't even play Sorare if I didn't have a Sorare data sub. Like, I love hearing that because I do genuinely feel like we make Sorare, like the Sorare experience, so much better. Matthew said, have you ever done a suggested lineup versus submitted lineup comparison over a period of time to see the results? I have not. We did do like individual game week ones. It was John Nellis, Chani, Phils, and Zanub, I think, were the 4 that did it. That basically Yeah, they went through and just had the lineup suggestion and they go from there. The one thing that I do think people should do, and I did this for a while and didn't, um, but I'll show you guys kind of like what you can do. Let's SD suggestions. So also you can make new drafts if you want, so you don't have to overwrite all of your existing drafts here. Like for the midweek, um, let's just go. Yeah, that's the midweek. Um, just for All Star because I don't have like a ton of cards, but you could go to All Star and like you could see what the highest strength indicator is, and then if you wanted to go like, oh, instead of All Star, or I could try All Star Limited because you can use more cards there. Suggest same score. I guess I don't have that many limited cards, but basically what I was doing was going through. Actually, can I do this for the previous game week? Let's see if this works. Because I this is kind of it is a bit of a fun thing that like I used to do. But essentially, and this was I did this before the new competitions, and this probably takes so much time, and we don't have a button yet that will automatically do it for you. But the idea was like you go through and you get all of your suggestions. So Challenger Classic right here, I have a score of like 88. And then I would delete this because I want all the cards to be used. I guess you could, yeah. You go like Challenger in season. And here I have a suggestion of 81. So it's like, all right, if Challenger's Classic is the best, I put all of my Challenger Classic cards there first. And then once that lineup is built, I go to the next one and see like what the highest score is there. And you could basically go through and see like the highest scores and do them in order. And I did do that one game week. And I I don't even remember what the outcome was. I want to say I beat it, but I also don't know. So Rajuju, I always buy the 1 year option and need it anyway. Love it. I said exponential powerful is the lineup builder in combination with the button. Where we know that people want it. It's just like it's an incredible data load that needs to be considered. Major RT said someone was 100 and they didn't play. I probably need more than that. Palmo said, I'd go as far as to say you'll never be successful unless extremely lucky without Sorare data. I don't know if, like, I appreciate there are plenty of people that don't have Sorare data that are very successful on this platform. I just think that they probably spend way more time to be that successful than they would be using Sorare data. The Sorare data panic button is not coming that soon, but I appreciate that you guys want it. I will drop you guys with a quick stat here. So I was looking at podiums from last weekend, like not the one that just happened the weekend before. So basically, there were 45 podium spots, meaning first, second, and third in 15 competitions. So it was like Champ Limited in season, Champ Limited Classic, Challenger in season limited, Challenger, and all throughout. So there are 15 of them, like regular competitions. 45 podium places in Division One, first, second, and third. 27 of the 45 in limited were star members. 35 of 45, excuse me, 34 of 45 were rare. And super rare and unique, 35 of the 45 podium places were Silver Data Star members. It's like even just the lineup builder is worth it. And if you are interested in trying it out, 72-hour membership will allow you, like for the midweek, you could even wait until tomorrow. It's fine with me. Just leave your Sorare name below if you've never had a Sorare data subscription or membership and want to try it. And yeah, let us know. Try it out. Any questions, feel free to reach out to me. You can find me on Twitter at Andrew M. Laird. Same thing on Discord. Leave a comment in the video here. Happy to help. Investor Dur said, I'm late, but it would be amazing if AA could be included in the lineup builder. It's just on the form tab here, Investor Dir. Average, so you can change it L5, L15, L40, AA average over that span. So you can see which players have the highest AA over your last 40, 15, whatever you want. It's right there. Arthur, yes, please leave the comment, comment in the regular video, not like in the live chat here, in the video below. Or excuse me, in the comments below the video. Yeah, just leave it and we'll get you set up. There you go. Form tab's got it. Thank you to everybody for coming. If you could please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Shout out to Quinny. If there are any other comments or things that you guys want to talk about, feel free to hit me up. I just gave you that. Andrew M. Laird, pretty much everywhere. And we'll jump into that. Sorare said, I'll add another voice just to say how game-changing a Sorare Data membership is. Thank you for being a member. And yeah, once again, if you want to try us out, 72 hours for free, drop your name below and we'll get you hooked up. Thanks, everyone. Don't forget to get those steps in.